Hello there, and welcome back to the Codex. Today I wanted to have a quick overview of a weapon that I feel like has been continuously slept on since its initial non-prime inception and still all the way through its prime. And it just recently came back through Resurgence along with Revenant, and that is Phantasma Prime in this case. Now I will note, so this video is going to be covering the prime version of the Phantasma, which is Mastery Rank 14, required to use it. The regular Phantasma is only MR9. So if you're ever in a situation where the Phantasma is either vaulted and you don't want to buy it, for example, and you don't have the relics to farm for it, or you're not a high enough master rank to use an MR14 weapon yet, but you are high enough to use 9 and you're really interested in using this weapon, you can honestly go ahead and just use the regular Phantasma, because the Phantasma to Phantasma Prime upgrade, in my opinion, is the worst prime upgrade in the entire game. It's a pure status weapon, basically, and they didn't give it any more base damage, and they did not give it any more status chance. It got barely increased crit chance and crit damage, which is, for the most part, irrelevant to the way that you typically want to use this weapon. So if you want to use the regular Phantasma, the DPS status-wise is going to be very similar. The Phantasma Prime is literally better, though, and one of the best things about it is the fact that it does have a larger magazine, or not magazine, ammo reserve pool, which is nice. And even though the crit isn't a huge deal, the increased crit buffs are, of course, a technical DPS upgrade. So if you can use the Prime, use the Prime. Now, with that little spiel out of the way, here is the first build we're going to talk about. So with the introduction of Primary Crux, this became just about a best-in-slot arcane on the Phantasma, because 300% status chance and 60% ammo efficiency is absolutely beyond hilarious on this weapon. At base, this weapon has, I believe it's 22.2% status chance. Yeah, 22.2%, and that is per projectile. This is a beam shotgun. So this uses shotgun mods, and it calculates status as a beam. Beams only consume half an ammo per tick of damage. So the beams are absolutely insane when it comes to status. So when you give it a 22.2% base status chance, and then you throw 300% on top of that, plus status mods, and all this multi-shot, it's like the 500 cigarette beam, 500 heat procs on an enemy. Absolutely hilarious. After Crux is stacked up, this has double the status chance that you see here, because it actually adds another 66% basically. So this is around 132% status chance. And again, that is per projectile. That is insane. So this build here is basically a generic viral heat proc stacking build. Most of the things here are basically what you would expect. Of course, we have to use Prime point blank for a base damage, because we're not using a base damage. Well, actually, we are using Savvy, so you don't have to use point blank. You could actually replace that with something else. That's up to you. If you wanted to replace that, you could put on the heat dual stat mod there. It really doesn't make a big difference either way. You will get a decent chunk of base damage from Savvy. So if you want to do that, feel free. Of course, our multi-shot, one of the mods that you see here that you might be concerned about or wondering about is Blaze. So this gives you 60% base damage and 60% heat. Why am I using this instead of going for the status mod? And it's because we get, again, 300% status chance just from a Crux, and we still have status chance mods on. So I felt like going for heat and then a minor base damage bump was actually the better play, basically. Kind of flesh out the base damage a little bit more, as opposed to an amount of status chance that starts to get into some potentially diminishing territories, thanks to the amount that we already have in the weapon. Now, another really funny build you can do is basically exactly this, but with electric instead, because we do have a prime mod for electric on shotgun. So prime charge shell setup for a huge electric concentration setup. You can see the heat was only 73.1, but the electric is at 89.4, so you will get a higher concentration of electric procs. Also, since we switched from Blaze back to a dual stat, which is Shell Shock, we do have an even higher status chance. So now we're more like 140+% status chance, and again, that is per beam projectile, which is insane. I'm going to use this build to showcase it, the electric version, just so you can see how funny it is. Let's go ahead, hop in a mission, and take a look at what happens when you apply 1,000 electric procs to somebody. All right, here we are in the mission. So one of the reasons why a lot of you might prefer the electric build over the heat build, even though the infinite heat stacking build does do amazingly good damage, and it's always fun seeing an unlimited amount of heat procs on somebody. The electric stats effect includes a minor chaining AoE effect, so by using electric instead of heat, you're hitting everybody around the primary target that you're hitting along with them. So it's a, you know, just an AoE total kind of crowd KPM bump, which is kind of nice. And you can see here, even though we're basically not critting at all, I do have a nourish up right now, by the way, so we're gonna just to call that out. I am currently getting viral from that as well. That'll end in a moment here, then I won't recast it. So it's really nice being able to apply a ton of electric procs to not only, like I said, the main target, but everybody around them. And you can see here, even though the Phantasma doesn't really crit at all, the damage is still incredible because all of our damage is just coming from sheer insane amounts of status stacks. And especially if you pair this with a good companion. Speaking of viral procs, like right now I'm using the Panzer. It's priming a lot of these enemies with up to 10 viral stacks, so that of course is a large damage increase. Even though the Phantasma, we do already have viral on it, so not a huge deal. If you wanted to, you could probably take viral off and try to just prime with your companion, but this thing does too much damage. You really don't need to fuss around with trying to min-max like that. Because again, the numbers speak for themselves. This is without any Warframe buffs. I mean, I just saw a 4 million electric dot tick right there. That is how much damage this thing is able to rack up on enemies. And again, since it is a electric build, and due to the way that electric dots work, the more enemies that you have clumped up to each other, since the Phantasma has infinite body punch through, if you have 2 guys clumped up, as opposed to 6 guys clumped up together, the 6 guys clumped up are going to take a lot more damage because they're all going to hit each other with their electric stats effects. Let's go ahead and use Shattered Lash here a little bit, because why not? I love playing as Gara. She's so good and so stylish. But yeah, the Phantasma is incredible, but there's still at least one more build that we should talk about, and that is a forced crit build. Let's take a look at that. So just as a showcase of if you're interested in doing synergies, for example, I've put on Nezha, and I do have one singular Tau Forged Corrosive Shard and Roar on Nezha, and those are really the only 2 things that matter. So this is going to cause Corrosive to go insane, and Roar is calculated as a Bane multiplier, so if we apply both of those factors to this build, the Forced Crit build, we changed this build to Corrosive and Cold. Now we do have Prime Ravage on here. Between Prime Ravage and Tenacious Bond, we're up to a 5.2x crit multiplier, although, since we're using a Corrosive Cold setup, the stats effect of Cold is that when an enemy is fully frozen, they receive up to a flat plus 1x crit multiplier, so it's basically like another 1x version of Tenacious Bond. So in a lot of cases, instead of 5.2x, this will actually be 6.2x. But on top of that, we also put Frostbite on this build. When Frostbite is stacked up, it gives you a ton of, again, even more crit damage and multi-shot. So overall, this is a Corrosive Cold magnetic build, because we also threw Magnetic Strafe on here to absolutely shred through enemies that might have Overguard on them, or I suppose shields, although Overguard is really the main concern. And of course, now that we're rocking Corrosive, and thanks to one Tau Forged Emerald Shard, Corrosive is going to be a 98% armor strip instead of 80, which is a massive damage multiplier compared to how much armor that Corrosive usually strips. So combining all of these factors together, along with Roar, which again is calculated as a Bane multiplier, so that's very powerful, is going to be a lot of damage. Let's hop back in that same mission and showcase this. All right, we are back in the mission, rocking the forced crit setup. Oh, you know what? I forgot to say, another important factor, this is actually literally critical to the video, is Nezha has Combat Discipline and Arcane Avenger on. So Arcane Avenger is being triggered consistently by Combat Discipline, the Aura mod, and then Avenger is giving you a flat 45% crit chance bump. Forgot to say that. Kind of important. So you do need to use Avenger in the setup to be able to crit about half the time. Now with that in mind, now that we're forcing ourselves to crit about half the time, and with that much higher crit multiplier, and with that massive armor strip, and again with the extra cold procs providing even more of a little bit of a crit bump there, this is just doing insane amounts of damage. So now instead of doing absolutely insane back-end status stacking damage, we're now just directly shredding them with just raw DPS beam output, basically. Which is another fun way to use this weapon. So it's totally up to you guys how you want to use this. It does absolutely shred basically anybody in regards to regular enemies, although admittedly it's not good against Acolytes. You're not going to see an Acolyte in this video. But if you were, admittedly the performance is not good, because weapons that deal most of their damage thanks to stacking a ton of status, just don't perform well against enemies that have a status cap on them, like Acolytes. So you probably want to bring a secondary or a melee that does a lot more raw, super high crit damage, for example, rather than relying on status that you can use to kill Acolytes and attenuated enemies and things like that. But for 99% of the regular enemies that you're going to be fighting in a mission like this, the Phantasma will completely shred them, and it feels great to use. The reload is super fast. It's a satisfying weapon. It's very satisfying seeing somebody die from 1,000 electric procs on them, which really wins all around. So yeah, I just want to show that this weapon is actually incredible. I've loved it since it originally came out, the original Phantasma, back with the planes, whenever that was, basically, when Revenant came out. And of course, it became even better with the Prime, technically, although it's not a great Prime upgrade in my opinion, so that's why I said if you want to, you could just use the regular and not be losing out on a whole lot of that performance. But hopefully you guys enjoy the weapon. If you decide to try it out, let me know down below what kind of version of the build is your favorite. If you have any variants that's very different from what I've shown you that you think work well, you know, let me know down below, and I might experiment with it myself, because like I said, I love the weapon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you found it helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Enjoy the video and want to support the channel? The best way you can do so is to like, comment, and share the video along with subscribing to the channel if you think I've earned it. And if you want to catch me live on Twitch, my schedule is posted on the screen right now, so feel free to drop by and ask questions. As always, thank you to all of my YouTube members, Twitch subscribers, and Patreon supporters.